Welcome to another edition of Metaphysics of WW2. Here we discuss issues and topics relating to metaphysics, astrology, and astrotheology. With a basic understanding of this hidden knowledge, more light can be shed on this dark period of human history.
The word occult comes from the Latin verb occultus, which means to hide or conceal. Most people today shy away from occult concepts, believing them to be the domain of the devil, and those who open the door to such things will burn in damnation for eternity. This, of course, is pure fantasy promoted by monotheistic religions, especially the Catholic Church, designed to subdue the masses while they utilize its potential and power for themselves. During the latter part of the 19th century, border sciences relating to occult matters increased in popularity, with an enthusiastic renaissance sweeping throughout much of the Western world. The epicenter to this new interest grew within Germany. Seances, astrology, parapsychology, tarot, and dowsing were practiced in nearly every town and city across the country. School and university courses emerged teaching esoteric wisdom, pagan spirituality, together with ancient mythology. After the defeat of Germany in World War I, the country was disemboweled financially, economically, and emotionally by the victors, leaving many Germans destitute. Ruined by events out of their control, had a profound effect on many Germans, especially those who were involved in the war effort. After losing a great deal of their family's wealth, a number of them turned away from physical concerns towards spiritual and occult matters, looking for deeper answers and meaning to their new predicament. When men lose everything and have nothing left in this world to occupy their minds, they turn inwards, away from material matters, towards spirituality. This was one reason why post-war Germany became the heart of Western occult and border sciences. Free from the material responsibilities associated with prosperity and materialism, a number of Germans began to think deeply, broadly, and internally. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. Nikola Tesla. During the interwar years, many Germans were searching for an authentic German spiritual philosophy which could offer an alternative to the established system promoted by Western Judaism and Christianity, which they believed was counterproductive to their future development and prosperity. They wanted a philosophical ideology incorporating the transcendental realm of mysticism, along with what they believed to be their mythical pagan heritage. They wanted to pull the German Volk as a nation towards what they perceived as higher vibratory realms within their collective spirituality and inherited blood, up towards greater levels of conscious awareness, decoupling themselves from the shackles associated with what they regarded as low energies of Judaic Saturnine materialism, and also to distance themselves from the fading empire of Jupiterian Christianity as the end of the Piscean age was approaching. Many Volkish esoteric orders and occult organizations emerged throughout Germany. As interest in these matters grew, some groups modeled themselves on the occult mysticism within Anglo-French Freemasonry. Groups like the Theosophy Society, Anthroposophy, the Thule Society, Vril Societies, Areosophy groups, the World Ice Theory, and Runology. Theosophy is a mix of theology and philosophy, derived from the Greek words theos, God, and sophos, wise. It began as an esoteric wisdom religious movement created in 1875 by Helena Blavatsky, a Russo-German aristocrat, and Colonel Henry Olcott. According to the society, the object of theosophy was to collect and diffuse a knowledge of the laws which govern the universe. Blavatsky had spent most of her life studying all the major religions, believing they all came from an archaic wisdom, which was once known throughout the world, but now lost. She combined all the profound truths associated with the major religions to produce a new global spirituality which explained the human conscious connection to the universe. Beginning in New York, it quickly spread, and with the help of sponsorship from Austrian and German intellectual circles, Blavatsky was able to promote alternative views about human history, race, and religion. Theosophy tried to unite scientific and supernatural ways of thinking, while holding on to the tales of border science and ancient wisdom. Blavatsky believed in cosmic cycles, and that every solar system was an expression of universal consciousness, or logos. Each individual solar system was a solar deity with orbiting planetary ministers possessing unique qualities along with a conscious spirit. These were essentially the building blocks which helped to generate and influence our perception of reality, and that human evolution is a reflection of planetary evolution as it progresses through transits and cosmic cycles. Some theosophists believed that supernatural powers of spirituality, clairvoyance, and telepathy lay dormant within the higher races, and that mixing the lower races diluted and restricted humanity's ascension upwards. And in order to remedy this problem, lower forms must be thrown out to purify the dominant race. They also believed in an ancient secretive brotherhood of spiritually gifted and enlightened beings referred to as the Masters. Based in Tibet and the Himalayas, this ancient brotherhood with paranormal powers was thought to be watching over humanity, guiding and tweaking its future development. The task of some of these masters throughout history, including Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Gautama Buddha, and Confucius, men of great inner wisdom, was to revive the ancient holistic universal religious philosophy which will eventually overshadow all existing religions. Theosophists believed humanity is the result of 7 root races going back thousands of years, in a perpetual cosmic cycle of higher and lower levels of conscious awareness. The first root race, pure spirit who lived on a continent called imperishable sacred land. The second root race, Hyperboreans, also pure spirit, lived near the North Pole, which was much warmer during those times. The third root race lived on a continent called Lemuria, where the Indian Ocean is today. The fourth root race, higher beings descended to earth and influenced our physical bodies, living on a continent known as Atlantis. This race, some being giants, became decadent, arrogant, and abusive with their powers, resulting in the Great Deluge. Survivors relocated to safety in Egypt, Europe, and the Americas. The fifth root race, the Aryans, which were believed to be the dominant race during Blavatsky's lifetime, and would be led into the sixth root race by a future Buddha. The sixth root race, the future of humanity, will slowly develop out of the fifth root race, possessing an advanced sixth sense of perception. The seventh root race would emerge in the future, completing the end of the human evolutionary cycle. The purpose of human life, according to the Theosophists, is to emancipate the human soul. However, some modern scholars consider Blavatsky's work and that of the Theosophy Society in general to be no more than science fiction. Anthroposophy was developed in 1912 by Rudolf Steiner as a breakaway group disgruntled by the direction which the German Theosophical Society was going in. The breakaway point came when the then president of the Theosophy Society, Annie Besant, promoted the young Jiddu Krishnamurti as the new Messiah or reincarnated Christ. This was too much for many members to swallow. Instead, they distanced themselves from Besant and followed Steiner to his Anthroposophy Society. This new society leaned more towards an individual ideology as opposed to a universal brotherhood promoted by the Theosophists. Anthropo is Greek for human, and Sophia, as already mentioned, means wisdom. Consequently, the new society centered around human wisdom as opposed to divine wisdom. With its roots in German idealism and mysticism, Steiner and his followers, most of whom came from the Theosophy Society, believed in an intellectual, comprehensive spiritual world, which was accessible to the individual through personal inner development, independent and sensory experience towards supersensory consciousness, essentially promoting the creation of the sixth root race through individual development. In 1923, Steiner established a school for spiritual science, but died shortly afterwards in 1925. In the past, humanity advanced by throwing off the lower forms in order to purify itself, and it will rise still higher by separating out another kingdom of nature, the kingdom of the evil race. Rudolf Steiner. Steiner also believed that in the grand cycle of spiritual evolution that the Germanic race had advanced further than all the other races of the day, and that marriage between Aryans and non-whites or Jews was at odds with Germany's future ambitions in sponsoring positive spiritual and biological evolution. Although both the Theosophy and Anthroposophy Society were closed down by German National Socialists during the 30s and 40s, these societies had influenced many German and Austrian intellectuals, and it could be argued that some National Socialist Party members could have interpreted the root race theory along with other concepts as confirmation of their own ideas towards the God-man or master race. The Thule Society was initially a cover name for the Munich Lodge of the Order of Teutons, founded after World War I in 1918. It was originally intended to be a study group for German antiquities. Its beginnings can be traced back and credited to Walter Neuhaus, a wounded German veteran and arts student, and the German occultist, astrologer, alchemist and Freemason Rudolf von Sebottendorf. The name Thule is derived from the Greek legend of a lost island similar to Atlantis, which was home to an advanced ancient civilization. Modern interpretations of the legend suggest it refers to Norway or one of the Scandinavian countries. The society was very much pro-Aryan, and those who wished to join had to sign a declaration certificate of blood lineage. The signer hereby swears, to the best of his knowledge and belief, that no Jewish or colored blood flows in either his or in his wife's veins, and that among their ancestors are no members of the colored race. According to some Nazi mystics, Thule was the capital city of the ancient land known as Hyperborea, the land beyond the poles, the same place which gave rise to the Theosophy Society's second root race of pure spirit. They also believed that this is the place where an ancient race first interacted genetically with indigenous earthlings to create a new hybrid race. Because the Thule Society was deeply rooted in blood and racial ideology, it was only a matter of time before it became politicized and used as a mechanism to counteract the spread of communism and Jewish influence throughout Germany. After World War I, Germany was in disarray. Factions from all walks of life were competing for power. The German Revolution of 1918-19 saw the Communists take Bavaria on April the 6th by installing their newly formed Bavarian Soviet Republican government, seeking independence from the also newly created Weimar Republic. During the period of communist rule in Bavaria, the government accused the Thule Society of trying to infiltrate and destabilize its authority. Consequently, on April the 26th, the communist government raided the Thule Society's premises, arresting several of its members in the process. By April the 30th, all those Thule members concerned had been executed, including Walter Neuhaus and Prince Gustav of Thorn and Taxis. This sent shockwaves around Germany, and as a result, 30,000 troops and 9,000 elements of the German army marched into Munich to retake the city. On May the 3rd, after fierce fighting, they eventually took back control, executing many of the Communist Party members in the process. In order to get their message out and influence the general public, the Thule Society in 1918 purchased the weekly newspaper called the Munich Observer. They later changed the name to the Munich Observer and Sports Paper, which eventually became known as the People's Observer, ultimately contributing as a major element towards Nazi propaganda. Anton Drexler, who established the German Workers' Party in January 1919, was looking for alliances as well as sponsors to promote his new political workers' party, a party which would promote German interests and counteract the spread of Jewish-backed communism. He found such a group in the Thule Society, which at that time was also looking to expand its own interests. In September 1919, Adolf Hitler joined the German Workers' Party, which was now becoming somewhat influenced by the Thule Society. By February 1920, the DAP, German Workers' Party, had rebranded itself towards National Socialism, becoming the NADAP, the National Socialist German Workers' Party. By the end of 1920, the People's Observer, owned by Rudolf von Sebottendorf, one of the founders of the Thule Society, was purchased by the National Socialist German Workers' Party, who put Dietrich Eckart up front as one of its first editors. During the course of 1921, Hitler managed to acquire all shares to the newspaper, becoming its sole owner. This move made sure Hitler had full control over the promotion of his party's ideology and vision for the future. By this time, Rudolf von Sebottendorf was no longer a Thule Society member. He left Bavaria after being blamed for allowing Thule Society members' names to fall into the hands of the communist government of the Bavarian Soviet Republic. He eventually found his way to Turkey, where he lived until 1945, when it was believed at the end of the war he committed suicide by jumping into the Bosphorus. Once the National Socialists got their act together, expanding their own membership, it began to take its toll on the Thule Society as many members left, leaving the Thule Society to fall into decline, and by 1925 it was finished. The most prominent members of the Thule Society, who later became leading Nazi Party members, included Rudolf Hess, Deputy Führer, and Hans Frank, Adolf Hitler's personal lawyer. Also Alfred Rosenberg, Julius Lehmann, Gottfried Feder, Dietrich Eckart, and Karl Harrer were also reported to have attended Thule Society talks and meetings when it was active. Vril owes its heritage to an 1871 novel written by Edward Bulwer Lytton. The novel was initially titled The Coming Race, but subsequent editions were renamed Vril, The Power of the Coming Race. According to Mark Birdman, Lytton was an archpriest of an ISIS cult in Britain and wrote the novel The Last Days of Pompeii in 1834, an ISIS cult story which was a catalyst inspiring other ISIS cults to spring up around the mid to late 19th century. One of these cults was called Isis Uranus Temple of the Hermetic Students of the Golden Dawn. Another such cult was the Theosophy Society, in which Madame Helena Blavatsky published a book titled Isis Unveiled. In Lytton's 1871 book, he talks about a super-subterranean master race who possessed a powerful supernatural energy called Vril. Some occultists, like Blavatsky and Rudolf Steiner, considered Vril as plausible, with a certain amount of cult truth behind it. However, although there is no credible evidence to support a specific society known as Vril, there were many groups and occult organizations who considered that an extrasensory supernatural force was real and tangible. Whatever name you want to call this powerful energy, it was seen as a lubricating force behind higher levels of occult practices and awareness. Ariosophy is another portmanteau word which combines Aryan with wise, alluding to wisdom concerning the Aryan race. From today's perspective, it really does stretch the boundaries of border science and rational thinking, but certainly gives a clear example of what kind of thought processes were taking place within aspects of German society around the turn of the century. The phrase Ariosophy was first used by Lance von Liebenfels in 1915, inspired by historical German paganism and esoteric German concepts. It became the foundation to his life's work and racist views of the world. Lance was a former monk who pioneered Ariosophy. In 1905, he created the occult German nationalist magazine Ostara, an old German goddess. His magazine promoted anti-Semitism and Volkish ideas. Lance believed that his work and theories were used by the National Socialists as the foundation to their ideology, and because of this, Lance was hoping for recognition by Hitler. Instead, Hitler banned him from circulating his writings and removed his magazines from the shelves. After the war, Lance accused the Nazis of stealing his ideas, adding that he thought Hitler was of inferior racial stock. The tentacles of Ariosophy reached and influenced a broad range of subjects and disciplines throughout the pre-1945 era, especially in and around Germany and Austria. It underpinned a great deal of philosophy behind German National Socialism, aspects of the Thule Society, and certain ideas relating to theosophy. Overall, the German mindset of that era appears to be infested with a sense of superiority, elevating itself through the arrogant I am of the cardinal fire ram of Arianism. In hindsight, it is easy to see how that this would only antagonize and create friction with the rest of the world's population, which at the time was 2 billion against 80 million Germans. That is 96% of humanity seen as inferior to the German Nordic Aryans. It is clear even at this point in the book that storm clouds were brewing and the potential for future peace in Europe did not look good. In the last few years of the 19th century, an Austrian engineer-inventor by the name of Hans Hörbiger came up with a theory to explain how the cosmos turned out the way it did. Hörbiger came up with the theory not from detailed scientific research, but from an 1894 dream or vision in which he saw the entire universe and all its processes derived from ice. His theory basically states that the universe started with a huge star in space into which a small watery star collided. The impact caused an enormous explosion which sent ice chunks of all shapes and sizes out across the universe. Some ice congregations created both the Milky Way and our solar system. Hörbiger believed that the outer planets to our solar system were larger than the inner ones, only because they had swallowed up more ice. He also claimed that over millions of years, the Earth had sucked in many moon satellites, each one smashing into the Earth, spilling its debris out across the planet. The latest impact, which possibly contributed to the destruction of Atlantis, paved the way for this sixth and present moon, is what Hörbiger believed made up many of our ancient myths and legends. Initially, the world ice theory did not get much traction, probably due to its non-scientific nature, but as time went by, and because it offered an alternative to what Austrians and Germans perceived as Jewish-controlled Western science, it was given more credence than would have otherwise. Both Hitler and Himmler were enthusiastic supporters of the theory during the early years of the Reich. They could see its potential as a counterbalance against the newly developed theory of relativity, which by 1920 had become generally accepted by most of the world's scientific community. Because Albert Einstein was a Jew, the National Socialists and other pro-Aryan organizations wanted an alternative theory, no matter how ridiculous, as long as it was put forward by a member of the Aryan race. Pro-Nazi and world ice theory supporters were trying to justify the theory and to bring it in line with Germanic Nordic Aryan mythology. They were purported to have said, "Our Nordic ancestors grew strong in ice and snow. Belief in the cosmic ice is consequently the natural heritage of Nordic man." Once the war began, Hitler and the National Socialist Party had no more need for the support of fringe border sciences, and so their propaganda ministry ordered the World Ice Organization, which was now run by Hans's son, Alfred Hörbiger, to stop circulating further reports. After the war, the theory just fizzled out, overshadowed by new scientific discoveries which discredited Hörbiger's original vision, which came to him in 1894. is the common name given to an old Nordic German language, which is part of a family of ancient cuneiform wedge-shaped scripts. Its traditional name is Futhark, derived from the first 6 letters of its alphabet. Before writing was developed, most languages were oral, Old Norse and Germanic being no exception. Because rune script is marginally similar in technique to Sumerian and other ancient cuneiform, it is believed by some modern scholars that early forms of Futhark, known as Elder Futhark, was the result of exploring tribes of German Norse barbarians picking up Southern European and Mediterranean language influences, which they assimilated into their own version of Futhark. This developed into an independent form of communication, written as simple symbols on amulets and other objects. However, if you asked a Norseman or German 1,000 years ago where the rune language came from, they would say it was given to them by Odin. Odin is Woden. He is the personification of the planet Mercury, the planet of communication, referred to in astrology as the messenger. Elder Futhark, which consisted of 24 runes, appeared at the beginning of the Piscean Age. This evolved into Anglo-Saxon Futhark and Younger Futhark, finally into medieval and Dalecarlian Futhark. This basic form of writing made it easy to carve individual characters onto pieces of wood and other materials, which could be adapted for the use of divination. The origins of the word rune was thought to have derived from the German root word run, or Gothic runa, which means secret. Run is also Old Irish Gaelic for mystery, pointing towards the use of runes as a sacred form of communicative divination, which, if used by an experienced intuitive, can offer insight into esoteric wisdom. In the Gothic translation of the Greek Bible, the word runa is used for the Greek word mysterion, which also means sacred secret. Throughout the history of runes, they have been associated with magic, telling the future, or blessing people, places, and objects. Cornelius Tacitus, the 1st century Roman historian, in his work Germania 10, describes how the barbarian tribes from the north would use this form of divination. Augury and divination by lot no people practice more diligently. The use of the lots is simple. A little bow is lopped off a fruit-bearing tree and cut into small pieces. These are distinguished by certain marks and thrown carelessly and at random over a white garment. In public, questions the priest of the particular state. In private, the father of the family invokes the gods, and with his eyes towards heaven, takes up each piece 3 times, and finds in them a meaning according to the mark previously impressed on them. If they prove unfavourable, there is no further consolation that day about the matter. If they sanction it, the confirmation of augury is still required, for they are also familiar with the practice of consulting the notes and the flights of birds. It is peculiar to this people to seek omens and monitions from horses. Cornelius Tacitus, Germania 10. In Norse mythology, the runic language was said to have come from divine origins. Some old runic inscriptions back up this theory. On the Nollby stone found in Sweden, an artifact with Elder Futhark writing on it, dating back to 600 AD, there is an inscription which translates as, "I prepare the suitable divine rune for Hakopus." On the Sparlosa runestone, also from Sweden, which dates back to around 800 AD, this stone contains a mixture of both elder and younger Futhark, which translates into English as, "and interpret the runes of divine origin there." As the Roman Catholic Church spread its influence throughout Europe, it also promoted the use of Latin and Latin-based languages. Consequently, the expansion of Catholicism, together with improvements made in circulating ink and paper, sent Futhark into decline. It was no longer used as an everyday language, but more specialized for divination. The last place to use Futhark was the town of Dalarna in Sweden, who were using it up to the early 20th century. However, this was mostly for ornamental purposes. Heinrich Himmler was an avid occultist, fascinated with anything of old Germanic or Nordic origins. Runic symbolism was ideal for him to exploit, hoping to tap into any supernatural energy which could promote his cause. His SS Schultzaffel utilized the Sowilo or sigil rune not only because it represents the letter S, but also because it symbolized the sun, as did the swastika. It was also regarded as an old Germanic victory sign. Any link Himmler could find to underpin a romantic view of ancient mystical Germanic history would also give an air of credence to some of their border scientific theories. The Ahnenerbe, created in 1935, was initially a study society for primordial intellectual history, put together by the German National Socialist Party to research cultural history concerning the Aryan race. Founded by Heinrich Himmler, leader of the SS, together with the historian Hermann Rith and Richard Darry, creator of the blood and soil ideology. The goal of the organization was to search the planet for evidence which would support the claim that Nordic German Aryans were the catalyst behind meaningful civilizations and advancements in technology and culture throughout history. In 1937, the Ahnenerbe redefined itself as a research and teaching community of ancestral heritage of the German people. In 1931, a building known as the Atlantis House was built as a base to house the Institute for the Study of Atlantis. Designed by Bernhard Hoetker, a German sculptor and expressionist, the building was part museum and part lecture theatre. Hoetker's design was based on the ideas of Ludwig Roselius, a famous coffee merchant, and Herman Wirth, a Dutch-German historian scholar, and co-founder of the Scoortstafels Ahnenerbe. Wirth believed that Atlantis was the original home of the German race, an advanced civilization, some of whom, after the deluge, escaped to promote culture in Egypt and Mesopotamia. Above the original entrance to the Atlantis House was a huge carved wooden feature displaying the Tree of Life, the pagan wheel of the year, a cross, and a solar disk. This was designed to represent the origins of life. The pagan zodiac, together with Atlantis survivors, which hung on the cross, along with Christ and Odin. Although the majority of scholars take the SS to be an abbreviation of Skortstaffel, which translates as Protection Squadron, there is an alternative theory which has deeper esoteric roots, suggesting that SS really stands for Schwarze Sonne, Black Sun. This makes more sense when you take into account that Wewelsburg Castle in northeast Germany was to be the heart of the SS and the center of the new Germanic world order. On the ground floor of the castle's north tower, in the Hall of Supreme Generals, there is a 12-segmented zodiacal mosaic embedded in the floor, a symbol which also represents the Black Sun. 12 pillars are arranged around the Black Sun, which was to be a ceremonial hall for Himmler's 12 top SS generals. There is a variety of speculations on the internet as to what the Black Sun represents, many with credible explanations, but few understand the basic principles of consciousness, which helps to shed light on the matter. As with humanity, the planets and luminaries consist of a triad of consciousness, the focal, sub, and universal collective. Therefore, the sun's focal conscious expression is the yellow ball we see and feel with our biological senses. The sun also has a subconscious, and just like our subconscious, it is invisible from our physical perspective. This is the Black Sun. Discussed at greater length in my previous books, the subconscious is the size of an elephant in comparison to the rat-sized focal mind. Therefore, the real power behind the sun's potential lies behind its physical exterior, within the Black Sun. The angle of the sun in the sky has a profound effect on the human psyche. As our biology and karmic disposition is stimulated by the sun's rays and the angle of those rays as it moves across the sky. The ancient Egyptians referred to this as Horus and divided the sky into divisions of Horus, from which we derive our concept of hours. So just as the clock face has 12 divisions, so does the Black Sun, as it too will interact with our subconscious as it moves across the sky. The modern Christian version of Horus is Archangel Michael. He is the angle of arc of the sun within the 12 houses of the zodiac. From 6 a.m. to 8 a.m., Michael is in Aries, the ram, a time when most people awaken from the subconscious world of sleep, energized by the sun into focal conscious awareness. At this time in the morning, the majority of people fight like rams and follow each other like sheep to their place of work. Likewise, the moon also possesses a triad of consciousness. Its personified character in the Christian world is Gabriel. All the planets have an archangel, all ending with El, for these are the Elohim, the gods, and from those gods man was created in their image and to their likeness. The sun's subconscious personified character also has a name. It is known as Sorath, the subconscious sun, yet another expression of Himmler's SS. Michael stands at the right hand of God, Gabriel at his left. The Jewish Encyclopedia. Sinister is Latin for left-handed. The Sumerians also had a triad of gods, which influenced the Canaanites. Utu Shamash, the sun god, Nana, Sin, the moon god, and Inanna, Ishtar, the goddess of Venus. To the Third Reich, the sun was the most visible and strongest expression of God. Wilhelm Landig, a former SS member of the Vienna Lodge, said that the black sun was a mystical source of energy capable of regenerating the Aryan race. Rudolf Mudd, another Vienna Lodge former SS member, is quoted as saying, "Everything that can be comprehended by human senses is material, the shadow of the invisible spiritual light. The material fire is seen in this way, also just the shadow of the spiritual fire." The black sun symbol at Wewelsburg Castle has many esoteric dimensions and meanings to it, being seen as 12 sigil runes or 3 swastikas overlapping one another. The Theosophy Society believed in 2 suns, and that the sun we see in the sky is just the physical energetic manifestation of part of its overall metaphysical construct. The ancient Mexicans also believed in 2 suns, the young sun we can see today, and a much older, darker sun. The Nazi swastika, being an inversion of the rotating sun in the northern hemisphere, could be another expression of the unseen black sun. The Ahnenerbe as an organization were trying to find proof of Germanic ancestral heritage which would give credence to their theories of an Aryan master race at the top of the human evolutionary tree, a race consciously evolved with natural superior abilities in leadership and innovation, positioning themselves at the helm during this cosmic transition from Pisces into Aquarius. They were trying to create a Germanic Nordic mythology to replace the aging Piscean Christian religion, a new ideology based on the nation's collective blood and spirit over their focal awareness, with Adolf Hitler as their new messiah or Führer. Himmler understood the mechanism behind controlling the past in order to influence the future. According to David Barraclough in his book Digging for Hitler, the motto for the Ahnenerbe was, "A people live happily in the present and the future, so long as they are conscious of the past and of the greatness of their ancestors." This motto could be what inspired George Orwell to write his famous quote, which can be found in his book 1984, which was written after the war in 1948. "Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past." The Ahnenerbe sent expeditions all over the world, looking for artifacts to back up their claims. While Einstein and Darwin's theories were underpinning the West's view of science and human history, Blavatsky's theosophists talked of secret writings which pointed to a different version. She referred to remote libraries in Tibet which contained chronicles of an ancient lost civilization that existed thousands of years before the dynastic Egyptians. Blavatsky believed that after the deluge, survivors from Atlantis or Hyperborea made their way to higher ground, and one of these places were the mountains and caves of Tibet. This is one of the places where the founders of the Aryan race were thought to have begun. Himmler would promote anything which agreed with his Aryan narrative, while suppressing anything which contradicted it. There truly was an ideological battle building between Western academics and German National Socialist academics, and with Hitler and Himmler dictating policy, there was never going to be any compromise. Expeditions were sent far and wide, including South America, Iceland, the Middle East, and Tibet. When Edmund Kiss, an SS Ahnenerbe researcher, analyzed the ancient megaliths in Tiwanaku and Bolivia, he concluded that the really old stone structures were a great deal older than what Western academics were saying. He suggested some of the ruins were at least 17,000 years old, and no way were they constructed by the indigenous people. He believed they were built by a more sophisticated race from elsewhere. Unfortunately, Kiss was not considered as a credible scientist by the West's academic community. He was simply viewed as a popular novelist, and so his findings were dismissed. A similar conclusion was being drawn in Egypt, with the Ahnenerbe scientists saying that the pyramids were tens of thousands of years older than the dynastic Egyptians, and pyramids of such ingenuity could not have been built with stone hammers and copper chisels as mainstream Egyptologists have suggested. Critics of the Ahnenerbe thought they were just creating theories in order to support their claim of an ancient Aryan civilization, which predated the Egyptians and Greeks, and that all ancient historical structures of significance had some Aryan intervention. As early as 1926, it is believed that the Thule Society, under the influence of Karl Haushofer, were conducting annual expeditions to Tibet in order to find the roots of the Aryan race, together with hidden subterranean cities believed to be beneath the Himalayas. Haushofer was a German general, politician, and Zen Buddhist, who was credited as being one of Hitler's leading influences in esoteric knowledge. In 1945, Sidney Alderman, United States Chief of Counsel, wrote about Haushofer at Nuremberg. Haushofer was Hitler's intellectual godfather. It was Haushofer rather than Hess who wrote Mein Kampf. One of Karl Haushofer's students was Rudolf Hess, the Deputy Führer, a member of the Thule Society and the SS. It has also been suggested recently that Haushofer was Hitler's master teacher and father of Nazi ideology. On the night of March the 10th, 1946, Haushofer and his wife committed suicide at their home in Bavaria. They both drank arsenic, and just to make sure she would die, his wife also hung herself. By 1936, Himmler had taken full control of the Ahnenerbe, and by April 1940, the organization had been fully incorporated into the SS, with Wolfram Sievers appointed as director. In April 1938, the SS Ahnenerbe sent an expeditionary team of scientists to Tibet, headed by Ernst Schaefer. In the team were the following: Ernst Schaefer, explorer and zoologist; Bruno Beger, anthropologist; Ernst Krauss, botanist; Karl Weinert, geographer. Their task was to find evidence of Aryan ancestral heritage within the aristocracy and elite members of Tibetan society. Tibet had been a closed culture up until the mid-1700s. Because of its altitude and difficulty getting to it, few external interactions had taken place, preventing the dilution of their gene pool. It was also considered as a sensible place for anyone escaping a deluge to settle and store valuable chronicles and evidence of their ancient culture and heritage. The Himalayas are the home of the Yeti and abominable snowman, another relic from a forgotten age when a mixed multitude of races, demigods, and sub-races may have walked upon the earth. The Anunnurb scientists spent over a year in Tibet collecting as much information as they could, from the shape and sizes of the Tibetans' heads to their sexual practices. Once back in Germany, a documentary of the expedition was produced and released in 1942 for public consumption, entitled Secret Tibet. As the war progressed, it became more difficult for the SS scientists to leave Germany for study purposes, so they turned inwards, towards the inmates of the concentration camps, in order to perform experiments and collect what they considered to be essential data. According to evidence presented at the Nuremberg trials, over 150 subjects were chosen for research purposes by the SS Anunnurb and put to death for that reason. Once the war was over, Wolfram Sievers, the director of the Anunnurb, was held personally responsible for the unnecessary killing and taking of innocent lives. He was tried and convicted of crimes against humanity, for which he was sentenced to death by hanging. Bruno Beger, the team's anthropologist, was also eventually caught and in 1971 received a 3-year prison sentence for his part as accomplice to 86 cases of murder. Ernst Schaefer and the other members were eventually cleared of war crimes, but the result of Nuremberg discredited most of the work associated with the Anunnurb, even some of their valuable research, which made important challenges to the West's accepted official history narrative, were shelved. The two most important gods according to old Germanic tradition were Woden and Donar. These translate in Old Norse as Odin and Thor. Odin or Woden became the personification of the planet Mercury, which is now reflected in our week as Wednesday, or Dies Mercurii in Latin. He was regarded as the father of both gods and men. He wore a winged helmet or a floppy hat, along with a black-grey cloak. Most of his actions relate to knowledge and wisdom, along with ideas and new concepts to help man. The attributes of both Woden and Odin are the same, and can be described as knowledge, wisdom, thought, logic, magic, learning, wit, and creator of the runes as a method of communication, and observes all that happens in the 9 worlds. Mythology concerning Odin talks about how he desired knowledge and wisdom, and to achieve this he hung himself from the Yggdrasil tree. This tree stands at the center of the Norse cosmos, with its upper branches supporting a place known as Asgard. For 9 days Odin hung looking down into the waters below. Eventually he cried out in exultation when rune shapes appeared, revealing secrets to him. The Norse Irminsul is a solar phallic symbol used in early Anglo-Saxon pagan worship. It relates to the world Yggdrasil tree, which represents the union between heaven and earth, and is often seen with a solar wheel. The Irminsul is sometimes used to represent Thor's hammer. Its symbol is also used by the SS Ahnenerbe as they tried to associate themselves with ancient Nordic German history. The Irminsul also has a close resemblance to the glyph of Aries. Buddha with 1 D is Sanskrit for the planet Mercury, a planet known as the messenger, which is associated with the following characteristics: communication, understanding, thought, logic, knowledge, and wit. Gautama Buddha, the sage or enlightened one, has 9 special qualities: the accomplished one, the perfectly enlightened one, the endowed one with knowledge and conduct, the well-gone one or the well-spoken one, the knower of the worlds, the incomparable leader of men to be tamed, the teacher of celestial and human beings, the enlightened one, and the blessed one. There may well be a man who is the reincarnation of the former man who has become highly developed, who has so far purified his 3 bodies that he is now a vessel of a higher entity. And so Buddha became a vessel for Wotan, the same entity that was called Wotan in Germanic myths re-emerged as Buddha. Buddha and Wotan are even linguistically related. Rudolf Steiner. The old German word for Wednesday or Woden's Day was Wutenstag. Wanput is Thai for Wednesday, and Put is another word sometimes used for Buddha. Mercury rules over 2 signs of the zodiac, Gemini and Virgo. The energetic mottos for these 2 signs are I think and I examine, a perfect reflection of the philosophical approach of the Buddhist. Because astrology is the oldest living language known to man, it is a useful tool as a reference guide for gauging time, history, and mythology. It is worth pointing out at this stage that a growing number of modern archaeologists, historians, and scientists are coming to the conclusion that the official narrative of history, especially concerning Egypt and some of the ancient megaliths found in South America, are way older than we are being told. All over the world, artifacts and anomalies have been found which do not fit official lineal Darwinist history, artifacts which conveniently disappear quietly out of public view. However, one must keep an open mind on such matters in the light of adverse archaeological anomalies, some of which favor the mythological view of history as opposed to a theory which has, for years, struggled to find the elusive missing link. There may be another story behind real human history, one which goes back tens of thousands of years, a story which could, in part, concur with the work undertaken by German historians and archaeologists back in the 1930s, bearing in mind it was German scientists who excavated Troy, Mycenae and Babylon. Some of their work could turn out to be useful after all. The victors have always controlled the narrative of both the present and the past, and anyone who contradicts that view is either discredited or detached from the debate. It may turn out that both theories contain elements of truth, and our real history is somewhere in the middle. After the war had come to an end, Himmler and two companions were spotted crossing a bridge in Bremervord, northern Germany, on the 22nd of May, 1945. Himmler was trying to get back to his hometown of Munich. A British patrol near the bridge became suspicious of their forged papers and arrested them. They were taken to Westertemp for initial interrogation. Himmler eventually removed his eye patch, put on his glasses, and admitted to being Heinrich Himmler. The camp's commandant, Captain Thomas Sylvester, immediately informed British headquarters at Lüneburg, who sent representatives to verify the claim. Himmler was strip-searched and made to wear British Army clothes. They found one cyanide capsule in his old uniform, which they confiscated. He was given a sandwich and some tea before being taken to a house in Lüneburg, run by British intelligence for special interrogation purposes. Once in the house, he was met by a military doctor, Captain C.J. Wells, accompanied by Colonel Michael Murphy, Secret Service, Major Norman Whittaker, and Company Sergeant Major Edwin Austin. They made him strip and searched him again. In the official account, the doctor tells how he became suspicious when Himmler opened his mouth, so asked him to go to the window to shed more light on the matter. It was at this point Himmler supposedly bit both the concealed cyanide and the doctor's fingers, breaking the glass, which led to his death. However, suspicion of Himmler's death has been raised by British historian David Irving when he points out that this took place at 11 p.m. and no light could be gained from the window. He also points out that Himmler's face had been beaten with a suspected broken nose, concluding that Himmler's death was the result of a beating, not suicide. Coincidentally, another German SS officer, Hans Adolf Preutzmann, had left the same house, used for special purposes, in the same condition, dead from suicide, a few days earlier, on the 21st of May, 1945.